this issue of regional, sub-regional BMPs. First of all, they can be and should be and need to be identified through a watershed planning process. Okay, they end up calling it the WIMP. You know, a lot of people are saying that it's stronger than a WIMP. It sounds kind of wimpy, but anyway, that's for sure. That has to be consistent with the MEP standard, and that should say WIMP, not WQMP. I just realized that. That has to be approved by the executive officer. Okay. The idea would be that these WIMPs that they get approved by the regional board officer. They identify opportunities that a project proponent could use with a rigorous approach to how their project would fit into that regional plan, how that regional plan would be able to provide the design volume that their project is required to meet, that they can use it. This is the area in particular that's being challenged at the moment as I said before, by NRDC about whether or not a project would have to first optimize retention BMPs before it could even look at taking this. Yes, Nancy? A waiver process, okay? The Santa Ana board process, theoretically the Santa Ana board says that if a permit says that if you could get to that and identify a regional opportunity that meets all the requirements and has been approved and everything else, you can get there without having to go through the waiver first. The San Diego permit, if I remember right, says that you have to say you can't do it on site with lid BMPs. You need to have a waiver, then you can take advantage of, look at a regional approach. So, okay, and hydro modification BMPs, of course, are a whole series of things that are intended to further reduce the runoff characteristics from a flow point of view, to minimize any impact on downstream receiving waters from changes in hydrologic regime, and there's a number of those, and Eric will talk about those a little bit more later. And finally, source control BMPs are essentially the same as before. There's structural and non-structural source control BMPs. The list really hasn't changed. There are things that you do essentially, the project needs to incorporate all of those that are applicable to that particular project. Okay. Yes?
Real quick, on the previous slide, drop structures.
Yes.
What exactly are we talking about?
Yeah. Well, so if you have a development that may create erosive conditions downstream as a result of the new flow, different ways to do that. One of which is to retain more flow on site and release it at a lower rate. One of which is to look at improvements in the downstream watershed that is already, in a lot of cases, already eroding and are already susceptible. Drop structures are ways to go into a natural stream, unlined stream, and create drops where you slow the velocity and
essentially you're trying to get the stream to a stable grade.
Yeah. Right.
So say it's or prevent it from going into an unstable grade, but let's say that a creek is already down for quite a bit. Drop structure would be one technique you could use to get the creek back to a more stable system.
Okay. All right. Then there's all alternative compliance approaches. Okay. This is where you haven't. These are approaches that a project would have to look at taking if it was not feasible, that could not feasibly infiltrate or evapotranspirate or biotreat and release the full design capture volume that the permit sets up for low impact development. Here's where water quality credits kick in. Certain projects, I'll talk about that in a minute, can take advantage, certain types of projects, of reducing any remaining unmet volume, maybe eliminating the need to do anything else. It doesn't reduce the ability to first look at lid BMPs, but it kicks in. Then treatment control BMPs, which has been the kind of the mode for a lot of projects for a lot of years, is still an option if lid cannot be feasibly met. Treatment control releases, although we've tried to move most BMPs into the lid category, so hopefully this won't occur as often. And if all of those fail, the project cannot feasibly meet the lid requirements and the or treat and release, then the project in North County has to apply for a waiver to the permittee, not to the regional board. Copy goes to the regional board can refuse it. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself, I'll talk about it, but it's a process that allows alternative approaches for that project, which in the case of North Orange County, generally going to be some sort of a offset urban runoff fund mitigation program or project mitigation project in South County, and ways to go before those are all really fully developed. Okay. So not able to fully capture, then you can look at one of these alternatives. Alternative compliance plan can include one of these, but some of them, as I mentioned before, like on-site treatment control BMPs and watershed-based structural treatment control BMPs, if the water is not going to go first to a receiving water, do not need a waiver in North County. They can include one or more of the following elements. One way or another, there still is that design capture volume that has to be met with some combination of above. Okay. Credits. Real quick, there's a whole series of credits for special projects that are intended to assume to provide other benefits, environmental benefits, other kinds of things to the community that would have a difficult time. Most of them redevelopment, very narrowly focused redevelopment, and they can be used to reduce remaining design volume and maybe allow a project that can't meet the lid requirements on site to not have to go to treatment control or other alternative projects. Treatment control BMPs are similar to what was been around before, online street structural treatment control BMPs, watershed-based treatment control BMPs, and there are water quality performance criteria that are linked to the pollutants of concern in the water body. So, yes.
By that definition, would this include, say, trash breaks in your catch basins where you're removing?
Well, yes, but. Yes, but I mean, you may very well need, a project proponent may very well need trash devices anyway, just as a sort of pre-treatment to protect other things. In almost all cases, if you get to the point where you cannot totally meet the water quality requirement, the design capture volume with low impact development BMPs, then anything that would be a treat and release BMP has to be able to show that it is effective for the pollutants of concern in the downstream water body. And as you know, almost every water body in Orange County either has a TMDL completed, which sets up certain pollutants of concern, or has some pollutants, bacteria or other things listed for which a TMDL may not have been done. And so a trash rack or a catch basin insert by itself would not be effective at reducing bacteria, for example. So that by itself would not be a complete standalone acceptable BMP for a new development project. So while that can have a place, it may be desirable and necessary as a pretreatment. Your filters, for example, can actually reduce bacteria. So if you get to the point of having to look at a treatment control BMP, it still has to be able to be effective at meeting the pollutants of concern. Okay, waivers, we already talked about this. If all else fails, particularly in Santa Ana, and you cannot meet the design capture volume, then you look at other, this allows you to go to, without being able to meet with one of these processes, then a project has to go through the waiver process. They have to do the feasibility analysis. They have to show rigorously that it is not possible, not feasible to do it with lid, or with treatment control and release BMPs. Show that the cost of treatment control greatly outweighs the pollution control benefits. That's a bit of a challenge. You submit that to the permittee along with an alternative plan. So if you identify that there is a regional BMP in which you plan to contribute to, then that's part of the waiver process. The permittee, you as permittees, can approve the alternative plan, telling the developer this is what you have to approve it, but the regional board officer, executive officer, is in the loop to review that process and say thumbs up or thumbs down, okay, it works, or I have an issue with that. So it's not an approval process by the regional board, but it is a sort of a go, no go process. And if done right, hopefully that won't happen very often. The BMP maintenance requirements are similar to what was in the document before. Not a lot of changes there. Then Section 5 is sort of the process part of WQMPs. Similar to what was before, except that this greater, stronger linkage between conceptual WQMPs and process approval and CEQA. All right, I've talked a lot. That's an overview of the model WQMP, the changes, the new things, how it's looking. Any questions? I think actually this is the point where Eric's going to come up next, and the question is this a good break time? I think let's take a 10-minute break,